Josh Lagern, and I am joined, as always, by Evan Swords. Today, we're going to be covering the possible golden age of animation. We'll talk a little bit about that, but before we get to that, there's a little bit of a show that's been released this last week that we're going to discuss as well. So before we do that, Evan, how are you? We just spent time off camera talking all about me. It was my birthday, and I rudely did not ask you how you were doing, and then you hit record and said, "Don't worry about it." So I guess I'll just ask you on air. How are you doing? How was your weekend?
I'm doing good, man. It was your birthday.
Good.
That's what matters.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Thanks, man.
No, man, I'm good. I spent last week with me and the girlfriend's dad went to Mammoth to go snowboarding together. Which,
Nice.
that's a whole trip. Very, it felt very like serious, not serious, but like it's a big deal, right? Going with
Yep.
just him and me. So
Yep.
we had a good time, did some snowboarding, and that was a lot of fun. And now I'm back, and I'm like a drug addict. I am like waiting for shows to come back out. This week's episodes of shows because I finished Paradise and Severance.
Nice.
I'm waiting for it and stuff like that to come out, and then the big one, the one we're about to talk about.
Yes.
Which I really want to see the next episode.
Same here, man. We are, of course, talking about Daredevil Born Again, which is the continuation, thank God, because that wasn't always necessarily the case, per se, so they say, of the original Netflix series Daredevil that came out back in 2015. It was so long ago that show came out now. And man, I really loved the original series. I actually didn't get a chance to see season 3. I'm still catching up on Daredevil season 3. And, the first 2 episodes I watched Born Again, and it didn't really affect my enjoyment of the show, which tells you everything you need to know about whether or not you needed to watch the original series. But let's dive right in. Evan, what did you think of the first 2 episodes of Daredevil Born Again?
I mean, I really have enjoyed having Daredevil back. I think Daredevil, the seasons on Netflix, are some of the best television I've ever watched. Just perfection all the way through. I am such a fan of that show. So to have it back was fantastic. I am obviously going to talk about spoilers because it happens within the first 15 minutes of the first episode. So if you haven't seen it yet, please turn this off and go watch it because this is such a thing. Don't get this part of an amazing show spoiled by my dumb ass. But I love Foggy. I love Foggy as a character. I love Foggy as an actor. I think Foggy is absolutely crucial to everything that is Matt Murdock. I have enjoyed Foggy's character arc. I think a lot of times when you try and do that, like best friend, little like schlumpy best friend or like insecure best friend, like it comes off as cheesy or corny or just like annoying. And I just never thought that with this character. Like I have thoroughly enjoyed Foggy at all points. He starts off as this like really shy, kind of insecure character, and you watch him grow throughout the series. And the seasons with him like finding out that he's Daredevil and being there, the fights that they had, all that, like I've just loved it. And then they kill him.
Yeah.
15 minutes into the first episode.
Mm-hmm.
And
a pretty devastating death too. Like probably, we've had deaths in the MCU before. We haven't had a lot of deaths in the MCU, but Foggy's death in the first 15 minutes is probably one of the most devastating deaths that we've seen. Probably, if not the most devastating death that we've seen in the MCU.
I think it's probably better to, because I like the show overall, and I'm happy it's here. But I have so many thoughts, and I think we should start with the complaints because I do want to end on a positive note because I like.
Sure, go ahead.
But, sometimes all you need is just someone that is smarter than you to point things out for you to see it. And if you are on TikTok, inevitably, if you're a comic book fan or a comic book movie fan, you have heard of Stoops. She is a content creator. She's been doing this for a long time. She's one of the big ones. You know, she's very intelligent, very methodical in her, you know, discussions, very thoughtful, all the above. And I had loved this show, and I was a huge fan of the show in the first 2 episodes. And then she came out and was like, same thing. I love the show. I love the characters. But she pointed out, like, you know, early on, we heard rumors about how Karen and Foggy were not going to be in this show. And there was a huge uproar because as fans, that's what we want. We want those two characters. Like, they're not throwaway characters. They're pivotal to the story. We want them. And so all of a sudden you hear that they're going to be back. They're coming back. And then they kill Foggy within the first 15 minutes of the show, which then turns to have Karen just disappear.
Yep.
And then not only does Karen disappear, but then they immediately throw some new love interest into the fray. And we're just like, okay, they're dating now because of a coffee shop date. And it's just like, it felt like they were like, oh, we'll give you Karen and Foggy. And they just ripped it away from you. And then inserted these two brand new characters that you know nothing about, that have done nothing to earn these spots or anything like that, which I'm sure they will. I'm sure we'll grow to love these characters. But like when she pointed that out, I thought about it and I was like, man, like, yeah, that does feel really cheap. So
Yeah.
that was like my first, you know, like, oh man, that kind of does suck.
Yeah, that was that would be my only complaint about the show as well, is the replacement Foggy and replacement Karen that are basically playing the same characters, including, by the way, the replacement Foggy is Matt's partner at his new law firm. They just don't necessarily only do pro bono work now, and they have like a really nice office in New York. But they're still partners, and she still kind of functions the way that Foggy functions in normal Daredevil stories. But for whatever reason, you know, when they originally conceived the show, they didn't want to bring Karen and Foggy back. They actually, and you're right, the original intention was not to bring them back at all. Foggy's death was going to happen off screen, and Karen was just not going to be present for the show.
If they tried to kill Foggy off screen, I would have burnt that studio to the ground.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. It wouldn't have been great. The other thing, Evan, another thing that I found that was a bit, you know, I don't want to say it's bad, because it isn't bad, because Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio are amazing actors, and they can act, you know, they can act their asses off in any situation. But, you know, episode 1, we start with episode 1, have probably, and we'll talk about it when we get to the good things, but probably one of the best action sequences I've ever seen in anything Marvel. Like, right up there with, you know, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the hallway scene, or the end scene of Daredevil and Wolverine. In some ways, it's better because they're not relying as heavily on CGI. It's just, you know, one vigilante and one, you know, sort of thug fighting each other. One terrorist, I guess. I don't know what you would call Bullseye, but it was really great. And then it's sort of like from that point on, from the credits on to the end of episode 2, it's talking. It's a lot of talking. It's a lot of plot building, and that's fine. Look, I can hang with that, you know, but I'm also tuning in to watch a superhero show, you know, and I just felt like there could have been some more, even if Matt's not wearing the costume, there could have been some more action in the show, you know, and it just seems like it went a long time from that first 15-minute intro scene to the end of episode 2, when, you know, Matt kind of loses it.
I mean, I do get it. Like, I will say, I do understand that. I get that storytelling perspective. Like,
yep,
they're gonna give you this big action sequence. It's like, hey, let's go. let's give you what they want, bring everyone back into the excitement. But then they kill off Foggy, and it's like very obvious. It's like we are telling a new story now, so they're starting from scratch. I get that. That's fine. And I don't mean to complain because I really did like the show. I love the
Yep.
characters. I love the addition of White Tiger, although rest in peace. That's really unfortunate.
Hmm.
I loved the dynamic of Wilson Fisk and Matt Murdock talking to each other in the diner. There's
Oh
so
yeah.
much. It was so tense. There was so much energy in that scene, and it just was perfectly done.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for that, but it's early. It's early on.
It is early. Yes, that diner scene was great. And I loved, I was a bit worried because there's obviously MCU history now with these characters, right? They've appeared in other MCU properties. Charlie Cox has appeared in Spider-Man No Way Home. He's appeared in She-Hulk. Kingpin has appeared in Echo and Hawkeye. And, I was kind of a bit like, man, those shows are so tonally different from the Daredevil series from Daredevil Born Again, which has a very similar tone to the original series. How are they going to incorporate those storylines? And they do so pretty seamlessly. We don't hear much about Daredevil's past appearances, but we do hear about Kingpin. Like his history in Hawkeye and Echo is referenced in the show. And then Wilson Fisk references Spider-Man in the show too. He talks about vigilantes who, dress like spiders and crawl up walls. So it's really interesting to see how they approach that.
Yeah, oh man, I really did not care for the Echo show. And
I didn't finish it.
it sounds like she's going to be in this season too. Oh, I'll let you listen on. I'll let you in on a little secret. She shoots Wilson Fisk in the face at the end of the show, and then he's got no scars and is completely fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really do kind of just hope that they just tailor that back a little bit. But it sounds like Echo's going to be in this season of Daredevil. We'll see. But yeah, man, Daredevil gave us little inklings of how this season is going to go, and this is a longer season.
Yep.
The fight scene in the beginning was fantastic. The one thing I will say that was absolutely hilarious to me was, did you see the cinematography and did you catch how how do I say this in the way that makes sense? The cinematography came across as someone trying way too hard. It's like first year out of college, I want to use all these little tricks and stuff. It's it took me out of the show. The amount of filming tricks that were going on and spinning around and all of these things. It just really felt like the person that was handling the cinematography was like, oh yeah, watch what I'm about to do. And I don't know. It's it kind of threw me off.
It was definitely. Are you talking about in the fight scene in the beginning?
No, literally the whole show.
The whole show. So I was gonna say the fight scene at the beginning was definitely derivative of other things. I think that was really coolly filmed. But yeah, I can see what you mean for the rest of the series. Look, they're trying to recapture. They were doing something completely and totally different. And then midway through filming, Vincent D'Onofrio and Charlie Cox went to Kevin Feige and said, listen, this is not good. This is not turning out great. We need to pivot and we need to embrace the old show. The old show is great. And so, it's very clear to me that there was a directive to, match the tone, the cinematography of the previous show, but it's not matching. It feels like somebody is trying to match the tone of the original show. And I think that's what you're getting at. It's very okay, we need to make this look like the original Daredevil series, but
I don't think that at all. I actually think it's completely separate. It seemed like the original Daredevil show was like focusing solely on like get the shot,
Yep.
one shot hallway scenes, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the technical terms, and I'm not going to pretend like I do, but like I thought it was very straightforward. They leaned on incredible acting, incredible writing, and great fighting. That's what
Mm-hmm.
they did, and
Mm-hmm.
it felt like this time they were just doing a lot of tricks, like spinning the cameras with lights, like zooming in, focal point, like
Yep.
all
Mm-hmm.
of the above.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, it felt like, to me, it felt like they were like, you know what? There wasn't enough spectacle in the last Daredevil show. Like, we're in the MCU now. We need to make this bigger and brighter so people are excited and tweet about it or whatever.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that they need to do that. And I think, to your point, I think Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio know that. And
Yeah.
if that is true, then that means that they probably sense the same thing of like, you guys are trying way too hard. Which, like, if you look at every one of the TV shows in the MCU, a lot of them failed for trying way too hard.
Yes. Yeah.
And
They don't feel like TV show. Like they feel like they're trying to be film quality and they're supposed to be TV shows, you know?
yeah,
Whereas it
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, whereas if you watch like the Suicide Squad and then you watch Peacemaker, it's very clear that the Suicide Squad is a major motion picture at a studio and Peacemaker is a television show.
Right.
You know, so it's that there's a production. Disney was spending way too much money on these series. It was unnecessary. And, I think that the original Netflix Marvel series proved that. Two of them were excellent. Or I never watched Punisher. Did you watch Punisher on Netflix?
Oh my God, yes. Punisher
Okay,
was insanely good.
So I heard Punisher was really good. I watched the first season of Jessica Jones. That was really good. And then Daredevil, I watched the first 2 seasons and that was really good. I watched an episode of Luke Cage and an episode of Iron Fist, and I wasn't really into those ones, but those shows proved you didn't need high production budgets to make great television. Like you said, you just need great acting. You need great action scenes and, stories that really just capture the imagination,
Do you guess how much WandaVision cost per episode?
Oh, gosh. $50 million.
$25 million per episode, which makes it one of the most expensive Disney Plus shows ever made.
Wow.
The entire first season of Daredevil cost $56 million to make.
Yeah.
And it got a $14.3 million tax credit from New York for the production.
Yeah.
So literally an entire season of Daredevil cost 2 episodes of WandaVision.
Yep.
And like I know people like WandaVision, it's not that, I guess that's not my point. I'm just saying like that's just
it's over the top.
I don't know how you get a show that is cheap to make comparatively and everyone loves it and you go, you know what this needs? More.
Yeah.
But listen, I again, I don't want to end on a bad note.
I'm
so excited for him to be back. The scenes in Daredevil's new in this new season of Born Again, the scene when they're in the church and like Matt Murdock is sitting, on the bench with all the people for the funeral, and he's just like rage shaking for a second, like freaking out. Like it's just such a tiny little amazing moment that like Charlie Cox understands this character as good as any MCU actor understands their character. Like Charlie Cox understands Daredevil as a character as much or more as Robert Downey Jr. understands Iron Man. Like he just knows that character.
He really does. He really does. He's so good in the role. He's got so much riz, as the kids say these days, like he's and he's just, he's great. He's great in the role. And Vincent D'Onofrio, let me tell you something about Vincent D'Onofrio. That guy is top 3 MCU villain, maybe could make a case he's the greatest MCU villain in right now.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, the MCU's had some incredible villains, but yeah, him as Kingpin is just absolutely incredible. And speaking of MCU villains, Bullseye in the short amount of time that he was in the show did really well.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
like,
He was
that
great.
little son of a bitch, like the scenes when they're going through the office and he's just like casually flipping knives, killing innocent people. Like that's how you make a villain.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be gory, but just like the senseless murder of like a pure sociopath is just like the perfect, villain for Daredevil.
It's amazing how much, even though they're two totally different characters, how much Bullseye and Joker have in common, just in terms of their sociopathy, just like complete and total lack of empathy, even though they do two different things and they're two completely different characters. That's kind of what struck me is wow, like Wilson Bethel is doing a great job playing that character, and I hope he comes back. Spoiler alert, he survives his interaction with Matt Murdock, which is kind of crazy that he survived that, to be honest. Yeah. But man, we're looking forward to it. We'll be talking about Daredevil Born Again as the show comes out week by week, and then when the show ends, we'll probably do a full episode where we talk about the entire show and we'll break it down in more detail. But it's really interesting. It's Wilson Fisk is the mayor of New York City, which is interesting. Interesting parallels with the real world in that respect.
I mean, I don't want to talk about politics much here, but my God, that was like they were not pulling punches. And it really was. I mean, say what you will, but that was a very, very clear look into the world of MAGA and how people think and what that's like, because it really, like, the parallels were just so there, just like all the people on the street talking about like, he's a crook, but I don't care. Like, it's just bar for bar. That was incredible. Honestly, that was like a very high touch moment.
Fisk can fix it, man. Fisk can fix it, and he's got his little saying. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it goes. So we'll talk about episode 3 next week when we come back. But the main event for this episode is we're going to be talking about animation. And I would argue that right now is probably the greatest time in animation, at least adult animation. And some of the reason for it is they're bringing back shows from when we were kids. So X-Men 97 is a good example of that. Batman Caped Crusader is a version of Batman the Animated Series, which is interesting. So we're not going to be able to cover every series that's coming out. In fact, we're not covering Batman Caped Crusader because it weirdly wasn't a huge part of the cultural zeitgeist this year in the way that the shows we're talking about were, at least within fandom. But I'll just say I watched Batman Caped Crusader and Invincible, 2 shows we're not going to cover, and they're both really good. They're both great shows. But today, on the show today, we're going to cover X-Men 97, Creature Commandos, and Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. So we'll start with the first of those that came out, and really an animated show that dominated the cultural zeitgeist, at least among fandom, in a way that an animated show hadn't for, I don't know if ever. And that's X-Men 97. And I'm wearing the X-Men 97 shirt that I got from Target. I washed it, so it's all wrinkly. But had to rep it in tonight's show, as it's probably my favorite of the shows that we're discussing tonight. But Evan, what are your thoughts on X-Men 97? Here's my question: is it peak Marvel Studios, you think, or what do you think?
100%. It was a perfect show.
Yeah.
My first instinct when I see that they're bringing back old animated shows is, personally, when I watch old shows and old cartoons, like, they don't hit the same. If I go back and watch an old animated cartoon, whether it is, a Marvel property or whatever, it's not the same. Like to me, I watch it and I'm like, okay, I see how that was for a kid, or I see how that was tailored to a different generation, long time ago, et cetera, et cetera. So I was walking into this X-Men 97, really not with low expectations, but just like I'm not expecting, anything other than just a fun watch. And then it proceeds to just show the X-Men in a way that we have wanted to see the X-Men for as long as possible. There's so many, and I'm not like your top tier X-Men, fan. I know a lot about them because I'm a fan of the MCU and Marvel and comics and all the above, but I'm not like a diehard X-Men person. But like, there's so many little pieces that we've been talking about for the longest time in terms of like what we want out of X-Men, and is Cyclops is actually a badass. He's the consummate leader. He is a team leader, and we want to see him as such, right? Storm, god tier character, more powerful than you can ever understand. Want to see it. Same with Magneto, right? Gambit is one of our favorite characters from when we were younger. Haven't been able to see Gambit in any of these properties all the way along the way. Want to see Gambit. And my God, did that show give us everything. The first couple episodes with Cyclops, where he's like using his concussive blast to like spin around and dodge stuff and land out of an airplane. Like the Winter Soldier, when Cap jumps out of the airplane to dive in the water, and they're like, does he have a parachute? I'm like, no. Like, same energy when you see Cyclops dropping down. And I have so many thoughts, but I'll pause for now and say, what did you think?
Yeah, so I agree with you. I think that this is a perfect show. What struck me is watching the first 2 episodes of the show and thinking, wow, this is really cool, because they didn't, and this changed later, but I was thinking to myself, man, they didn't change. They've made it so that it's accessible for kids. And I would say it's accessible still for older kids, but I was like, but they've also realized that we would be coming back to the show, guys our age who grew up with the show, the original series, and they made it very adult and as well. And man, that speech that Magneto gives to the United Nations at the end of the second episode, I was like, this is one of the most profound things I've ever seen in a Marvel Studios property ever.
And like, that's a good example, though. It is that. Like, Magneto is literally an allegory for Nazi Germany and what it was like for Jewish people to grow up in internment camps and like the Holocaust and everything. Like the entire reason that he exists is to tell the story of like what the Jewish people went through during the Holocaust and what that does to a person. To grow up understanding what it's like to be persecuted and murdered just for who you are and how you're born. So there's so much like anger and tension and frustration and all of that exists in Magneto that we just really never got to see, because it's a hefty subject.
Yeah,
it needs to be done with proper care, and they did it.
Oh yeah, man. They absolutely nailed it. And then it gets to episode 5, and that episode, it's called Remember It because that's what is said at the end. My jaw was on the floor at the end of episode 5, and I messaged my sister, and I like consume this stuff, and we text each other about it. And she hadn't watched it at all yet, And I said, X-Men 97 is maybe the best thing Marvel Studios has ever done. It is so good. And I was so blown away by the writing, by the character work, the voiceover work. I was so impressed because they brought in some like very established actors, to like Theo James is in the show. And we can just talk spoilers, right? We can just talk like spoilers full. Just if you haven't watched it yet, go watch it. Theo James plays the villain. of the show. And man, some of these voice actors coming in, you know, really are just incredible and didn't really get to flex that much during the original run of the show. The actress who plays Storm, and I'm sorry, I would love to say her name and give her flowers, because she turns in just an absolutely incredible performance.
Wait, are you talking about Allison Seeley Smith, right?
Yes, Allison Seeley Smith. Oh my gosh, she is so good in the role. The guy who played Wolverine is really good.
That's Cal Dodd. That is the actual Wolverine too from the show.
Yeah. So it's just really interesting how well it went. Speaking of Wolverine, something that was really interesting to me about X-Men 97 is how uncentric it is around Wolverine, how much of a background player Wolverine is in the show. Because Fox, when they made their movies, made Wolverine the central character. And so whenever we've seen Wolverine in popular media over the last 30 years, you know, it's been basically a Wolverine story with the rest of the X-Men as supporting characters. But I thought that was very smart to put Wolverine more in the background, because that's actually the spirit of the original comics. More so, of course, there are great Wolverine stories within X-Men, but X-Men is really a story about Scott and Jean are kind of the main characters. And then, you know, the other character, it's an ensemble. So Wolverine is one part of many. But what did you make of that, Evan? I thought that was a really interesting and great choice. It benefited the show, I think.
Well, I mean, it's what we've been asking for since the movies. You know, in the same way that, you know, X-Men throughout the years in movies has known exactly how to ruin a character, right? Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique, they just shoved it down your throat for three movies. An interesting character that, because she was such a big actor, became the focal point of the movie, and we didn't need it. And in the same light, like, well, not the same light, because we all love Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. Wolverine is just not the center of the X-Men. He's not. He's an exciting, polarizing, cool character because he's a little dude that's got claws and that just thrashes on stuff. But, you know, again, the X-Men are led by Cyclops, right?
Yep.
Jean Grey is one of the most powerful mutants in the world. You know, Dr. Xavier, obviously, but like those, you know, Storm, like Storm is so much more than Halle Berry's little, you know, oh, I'm, you know, just gonna come in real quick and zap you like a frog or whatever. Like,
yeah, Halle Berry, not a good Storm. Sorry.
I loved her in the moment, but like, yeah, I mean, like, it's just the X-Men as a whole. I feel like that is not the focus, and Wolverine is a dish best served on the side, right? Give me a little bit of Wolverine. He's gonna come in, thrash some stuff, swap off some Sentinels' heads, and then we can go back to the rest of the story. And I think they knew that going in, and I think that is the benefit of waiting, you know, 27 years or whatever it was to have the show, right? You have 27 years to think about the right way to do it. It's going to give you a little bit of time, and they made a good decision there.
And don't get me wrong, Wolverine has some great moments. You know, he's got that epic fight scene with Nightcrawler at the end of the first season of the show. Awesome moments, but he's just not the center focal point. And it was great to see other X-Men get to come up to the forefront and, you know, get a little bit of time in the limelight. So yeah, great show. But yeah, man, honestly, it's probably one of my favorite things ever, live action animation TV film that Marvel has ever done. And I'm really looking forward to season 2. You're more versed in the comics. Do you know, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, Evan, so we didn't discuss this before. So if you don't know, feel free. But do you kind of know the direction they're going in with with season 2? Do you have a sense of the story that they want to tell?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, you know, well, what I would say is this, like, when you look at, like, how do I say this? Like, when you look at the character list in like the first one and like the everything that's going on, like the bad guys, what was the bad guy that they used?
Um, I was trying to remember the Living Sentinel.
Right. Yeah. He wasn't that big of a character really. Like I mean, he didn't have some huge role in the X-Men. So when it happened, very clearly it was like, okay, they're doing something different here. Now, obviously,
Bastion. It was Bastion.
sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Now Mr. Sinister, I think bringing Mr. Sinister back in is great. But the focus on Bastion was like not something that anyone I think would have really had guessed. So I hope that they continue that, right? Like that is the one thing that I think we've seen these big studios start to understand is it's okay to bring new characters or small characters or like characters that are not as well known and introduce them, because if you introduce them well, they'll be well received, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
well, Marvel Rivals, right? The video game, like there's a character in it named Luna Snow who is like some like I think it's like from the Marvel card game or something on your phone or something like that. It was a character they introduced there. No one knows, but now everyone loves that character and knows her very well. And no one had a clue who she was. So I think,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like I think that's what I want in a second season, and I would imagine that's what they're going to continue to do.
Totally. There's time displacement, which is always fun in Marvel stories. Apocalypse, I think, is going to be in it, so that'll be interesting. They've already done Age of Apocalypse in the original animated series, so it'll be a different story, which will be kind of cool. And there was a tease that Gambit may return, but is it Gambit as we knew, or is it a remnant, a variant of Gambit? I would venture to say, based on the fact that this was added to the Multiverse Saga roster of MCU properties, that it's probably a variant of Gambit, I would guess, from another universe. But really interesting. Well, we're going to come back to Marvel, but we shouldn't leave DC in the dust as they launched their new universe on the back of an animated series, which is an interesting choice. I'm, of course, talking about Creature Commandos, which is written by James Gunn, as was made evident in the credits of the show. There's an animated James Gunn there typing on his computer, which is an interesting choice. But it is the first DCU proper project that is very similar to some other James Gunn projects that we've seen from DC. So, Evan, what did you think of Creature Commandos overall as a show?
You know, I think if I had never watched Suicide Squad or any of the show or the movie, I would have loved Creature Commandos. But like, it was just another version of Suicide Squad. So for that, it felt lazy and cheap. Like we talked about it already on this podcast, but it's like, hey James, we get it. You're good at ensemble characters where a bunch of flawed characters, yada yada yada. We get that. You don't need to keep doing it. This is like your fourth iteration. Well, I mean, it's like your seventh iteration if you count the movies, the Galaxy and stuff. So yeah, I mean, sure, it was fine.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
you're the one that really likes Marvel or DC.
Yeah. So I really liked it. I don't want to. I mean, I opened it sounding super negative on it. I really liked it. I love Viola Davis as Amanda Waller. You can give me Viola Davis as Amanda Waller all day. She's perfect. Yes, they're rebooting. There's no reason to move on from from Viola Davis. She's like, who else are you going to cast in the role? You know, she's just like the perfect actor to play that part. So she's great. I really like Frank Grillo. But you know, I think you pointed this out in our last episode that he doesn't really like his character doesn't really look like Frank Grillo. He looks like James Gunn, which is kind of interesting. So that's really funny. But yeah, I agree. It felt like she even says this is Task Force M. Of course, we know the Suicide Squad is Task Force X. So it's the same story. Group of misfits coming together and and trying to save the day. That said, it was really well executed. I was actually surprised at how beautiful the animation was. Like the animation was really, really well done. And I was kind of expecting, those of us who are comic book fans kind of know the DC house style of animation typically is cheaper looking than this show was. This show had like beautiful animation in it. And it was great. And then just fun, quirky characters. Funny enough, it borrowed a structure. Did you ever watch Orange is the New Black on Netflix? Did you ever see that show? Okay, so it basically follows that same structure. It's like telling a story in real time, and then episode by episode focusing on a different inmate, or in this case, person on the team, and telling their backstory in each episode. So I thought that was kind of an interesting structure. That's not really something that we've seen before. That's not something that we saw in the Suicide Squad, for example. But yeah, it was really interesting to see how that goes. The whole thing around monsters and we don't need to care about these people because they're monsters. It's very clear through the writing that these are people. These are people that have families that are to be cared about. Some of these people go through extraordinarily cruel situations, and it's interesting that they're monsters, but the people in their world are kind of like the humans in their world are kind of the monsters, because of what they went through. So I found that really interesting. But yeah, really interesting choice to make this the first DCU project. My theory on that is this was already in production, and when James took over, and so he's like, well, it's going to be the first out because it's what's in production,
Yeah.
So I don't know that they would have done this if they were starting from scratch. They probably would have started with a film, but I'm kind of glad we got it. It was like a little appetizer before Superman,
Yeah.
So yeah.
And you don't want to do something that's even remotely similar to Superman.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Have it be something that's completely different.
Yeah, totally. I will say some people noted the show is a bit cruel, and I would agree that it is. If you're gonna watch this show, it's not like, I wouldn't say that it ends. It's not like a happy show. It ends on a pretty dark, like cruel note. And some people's criticism was it was cruel for the sake of being cruel. And I don't think, I would never say that about James Gunn. He doesn't strike me as that kind of person, but yeah, I think his strengths as a writer is finding the humanity in human kind of people, So yeah. Well, and lovable rejects. And DC aren't the only ones to have lovable reject characters. Of course, arguably the character that sort of was the first proto lovable reject, even though he's not that much of a reject compared to some of these other characters, is one Peter Parker, or Spider-Man. And of course, we have your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. That is the most recent of these shows to come out. And so, Evan, I'm going to let you take the lead on this one and talk about it. And what do you think of your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man?
So, again, the same light of like X-Men '97. I think when I first saw it come out, I was like, well, I mean, like, think about the history of it from the beginning, right? Like, this show was announced so long ago.
Yes.
So long ago. Like, I think after the second Spider-Man with Tom Holland.
Yep.
And so, like, we had known this was coming out for a long time, and we've all just been kind of hanging out, waiting for it to come out. Originally, it was going to just be a prequel to the Spider-Man story of, Tom Holland.
Mm-hmm.
And then towards the end, they decide that they're no longer going to have it be MCU canon. It is going to be, like an off-world, Elseworlds type story, right? So it's like a different universe within the greater Marvel Cinematic Universe. So we had a long time to wait for it. And then when the trailers first came out, the animation kind of looked terrible. Not in like a, I mean, like it was pretty, I guess, but like from a Marvel property, I mean, like I watch anime, and like my God, the maybe that's why anime doesn't have any like they don't spend any money on casts because they spend it all on animation. But like
Yeah.
when I watch anime, the animation on it's like insane, very very well done. And then so you see Spider-Man from the MCU, and you're like, oh man, I don't know about all that. And again, just blew me away by telling Spider-Man in the way that we all want him to be told. The show Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man was able to fully tell a story of Spider-Man, Peter Parker, what it's like to be Peter Parker versus Spider-Man, what it's like to try and balance your real life versus the superhero life, how he's constantly failing at the personal life stuff. They did it really well. They introduced all the like cliche villains that we're normally used to seeing. They were able to introduce Scorpion, Doc Ock, obviously Norman Osborn, right? Like they were able to like the Rhino, like they were able to bring so many of these characters in.
And a female version of Dr. Connors too.
Yeah, that too, which we'll see where that goes. But like, I'm excited for that. But they were able to bring in so much of Peter Parker's life in such a short amount of time. And they did it flawlessly. It was executed perfectly. I mean, my God, like, it's just, I wish I had better words to explain it, but like, they just told the Spider-Man story so well. And I really hope that it raises the bar for the Spider-Man movies that are going to be coming out. We'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. So I 100% agree. I think it was a great Spider-Man story. I loved how they introduced the villains and how the villains didn't just feel like, they're kind of doing it in long form with Tombstone, they're not immediately the sinister mustache twirling over the top villains. They're like these real people that get transformed into these incredible villains like Scorpion, who's the main villain through the season. It was really well done. I loved the animation. I loved the, they pivoted from this being an MCU Spider-Man story to being a alternate universe Spider-Man story. And so obviously they already, before they made that decision, they had some stuff built up and all of that sort of thing. And I think they really smartly pivoted by leaning into the sort of alternate universe. There's shot for shot the Tony Stark, picking up Peter Parker in Civil War. Yeah. It's the Norman Osborn scenes are kind of shot for shot, very similar.
But with a different twist, which is so perfect.
Yeah, and they really lean into it, and I think that's so smart. Speaking of, Coleman Domingo is excellent as Norman Osborn.
I hope he better play Norman in the MCU. He absolutely better.
I agree. He was so good in the show.
I'm sorry, but that has got to be what's going to happen, right? Like, they're not going to have him be on an animated voice actor, one of the best actors out right now. I think it's almost safe to say that that's what's going to happen, right? Yeah,
I would hope so, because he was pitch perfect as Norman Osborn. I mean, that was so perfect. And I don't know the actor who plays Harry, but that was a great take on Harry Osborn too. I think 21st century version. He's like a social media influencer. That was a really interesting take on it. And of course, a lot of the classic. We were missing Harry in the movies. In the show, we're missing Gwen, although it's been revealed Gwen's going to be in season 2, and MJ. But we didn't have Harry in the movies, so it's kind of interesting how they're choosing to make up Peter's core friend group. in a sense. So yeah, I really enjoyed the series, and like you said, I think it touched on every element of what you expect from a Spider-Man show. You know, Peter Parker is a teen boy. He doesn't know how to manage his life, you know, and some of us adult men don't know how to manage our lives either, you know. So it's like it's very relatable, just constantly feeling like you're failing everybody. Um, really, really interesting, well done show, I thought.
Well, I mean, you already said it, but like, I really love the choice they made with Tombstone because, you know, in a lot of the different mediums that Spider-Man's story is told, Tombstone is just this like big, hulking, weird, like undead kind of zombie looking dude or like almost Frankenstein looking dude. And he's just like, you know, just a big thug. And in this, to make, you know, his classmate who is so kind and nice and lovable and, you know, ends up in a bad situation because he wants to protect his family. Like, I mean, it sucks to see, but you're like, oh man, that's a really great take. I love that approach.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was really, it was great. And, you know, Tombstone kind of is the nice version of Flash Thompson in this universe. So that's a really interesting thing to see there as well. And kind of a cool inversion of that relationship because he befriends Peter, even though he's sort of a rival to Peter, for the affections of Pearl. He's, you know, rather than in the comics and in traditional media that we've seen, Flash is a bully to Peter. And in this show, Tombstone's not a bully to Peter. Peter's, you know, he sort of befriends Peter. Yeah. So that's kind of a cool inversion as well, and kind of an update because I think that's sort of more common now in these days in high school. People aren't, you know, there are bullies, but it looks different than it did, you know, even from when we were kids, you know. Mm-hmm. So yeah, man. Well, yeah, lots of really great animation to come out. Yeah, like I said, Batman Caped Crusader was great. Invincible was great too. If people
give us a little bit of Batman Caped Crusader because I know you love the show and I don't know anything about it, so I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. Okay. So X-Men 97 is a straight up continuation of the original show, but made for adults. Like that's the way I would describe X-Men 97. And that works. It is so good, you know, but the interesting thing about Batman Caped Crusader is it's the original Batman the Animated Series team doing a completely different take on Batman, although it's very, very recognizably their style, but done in an adult way, set in the 1930s. So that's really interesting too. It's from when Batman was created. It's set in that same era. And it's very well done. And the other difference too is, you know, Batman the Animated Series was sort of a villain of the week show. It was like show by show or villain of the day because it was a daily show.
Right.
But yeah, it's like, you know, here's a Joker story, here's a Riddler story, here's a Penguin story, here's a Catwoman story. And there's a little bit of that. There's the villains are peppered into the story.
Right.
But there's also an arc going on in the show. It's the Harvey Dent story. So, you know, we've seen that many times. We know what happens in that story, but really well done. Yeah, I would just, you know, again, I told you, Evan, I think you would really enjoy it. I think that people would really enjoy that. It's on Amazon Prime, but really well done. And, you know, Jeremy Sisto plays Batman in the show. He had such huge shoes to fill with Kevin Conroy. Because even though it is a different show, I mean, it looks like the Kevin Conroy Batman, you know? And you know, you expect to hear Kevin Conroy's voice when he speaks. Jeremy Sisto does his own thing and he's great. He does a great job. And it's an awesome show. So yeah, I highly recommend Batman Caped Crusader. Great show, very well done. very well animated. Matt Reeves, who just did the Batman, is involved in producing the show. J.J. Abrams is involved in producing the show, so it's got a very good pedigree. It's those two guys and then the team behind Batman the Animated Series, and it's renewed for season 2. They're doing a season 2, so yeah, it's great. It's great.
That's awesome, man.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah.
I listen. I think we're at a point. I think this is kind of the entire point of the episode. I don't know if it's because we've been burned so much by the MCU lately, but like, animation is giving us the stories that we're meant to see with comic books.
Yes.
I am very, very open and very obviously willing to see a live action movie tell the stories that I love very well. But animation is showing that at most times, at some, it depends on your preference. I think it's the best way to tell these stories. And I think the stigma for so long is that, that's for kids. I think is really, if you can't tell, I think, the world of anime has kind of pushed us forward to a world where everyone understands that you can tell fantastic stories in an animated sense. And Invincible's doing a good job of that. Obviously X-Men 97. There's a lot of different things right now that are telling great stories. I mean, Attack on Titan is one of the best written stories in animation I've seen in a long time, and it's like so unique, and it's an anime. You think anime is like little e-girls and big bright lights and stuff like that. Like it's like a dark military story that whatever. It's like we are in a golden age. I don't know about the golden age. I think the argument's strong for animated content.
Yeah, and there was a golden age of animation when we were kids for kids, I think, of comic book series. But this is definitely a golden age for adults of animated series. On your note about anime, I totally forgot to mention this, but there is also a fusion of American comic books and anime, which is My Adventures with Superman, which is also very good. It's also very well done. So, I definitely people should check that one out too. It's on Max. Lots of fun. I haven't seen the second season yet, but the first season was very good. So, that's that. But hey, man, I think that's it for us today. Great show as always. We'll figure out something to talk about next week. But yeah, man,
we'll be talking about Daredevil every week.
We're going to be talking about Daredevil every week from here on out. So, but yeah, we'll have something else as well to chat about. But any other closing thoughts, Evan, before we head out?
No, man, I am every day more and more excited by the direction the MCU is going. I think they are doing much better than I think the world wants to think about. They just need some quick wins. Like if we get a good Fantastic Four, if we get a good Thunderbolts, we're going to be cooking with gas.
Hey, that new trailer for Thunderbolts where they highlight all the A24 stuff, that like all the A24 involved people. I'm smart. Like, dude, it's super smart. And I'm like, is Thunderbolts going to be like incredible? Like I've been thinking, is it going to be good? But like, is it going to be like really good?
Like it just needs to be fun. That's all. It is. It just needs to be fun with all those characters. Just make it fun. Good action and fun. That's all I need.
And to me, it's really hard to have Florence Pugh and Sebastian Stan and David Harbour and that whole crew of people and it not being a fun movie. I think it's going to be great. So I'm looking forward to it. But Evan, thanks so much, man, for talking to me here again about all this stuff. And thanks to our viewers for tuning in. I always forget to do this because it's not like in my natural personality, but definitely hit like and subscribe. If you want to get these episodes into your feed, you can follow me at Super Secret Josh on X. We also have our Super Secret HQ handle on TikTok. I know you can follow Evan at Mr. Swords on TikTok. Anywhere else you want to talk about where people can find you, Evan, or is that's probably going to be the place people will hear your comic book takes?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, I mean, we're early on. We're just getting started. We're one of 8 billion podcasts. You know, two white guys making a podcast is what we all do. But I really gotta say, I love talking about this stuff. I love the sound of my own voice. So this is a perfect combination, and I do have a blast doing this with you. So I'm excited to do it more, and hopefully we can hang out with more people that like to do it.
Awesome. Yeah, looking forward to it. Yes, we will have guests in the future, so that is also coming up.
Yeah.
So yeah. All right. Well, until next week, we'll see everyone later.
All right, man.
All right. I almost was like Paul Rudd and I Love You, Man. I'll see you next week, or I'll see you at another time. Did you ever watch that movie?
Yes, dude, that was that literally was so good. Oh yes. All right.